also a time at the end put aside for any questions you might have. But we're just going to take a few minutes to allow a couple more participants to join the webinar.
Will this be available on YouTube afterwards?
I got that message, and yes, this will be available on, I believe, the Airman's Facebook page afterwards. So yes.
Thank you.
And we'll just take another moment, let a few more people join the Zoom meeting as well. And if you just got in and missed it, somebody asked if the video will be available as a recorded, and they are planning on posting it tomorrow to the Airman's Facebook page as well. Oh, great. And you're able to see the presentation now? Cool. All right. All right, so we've got everyone into the Zoom meeting now. My name is Ryan. I'm going to be showing you how to put together your own Adsb device that you can carry with you in your aircraft or any aircraft you go into for that matter. It's also useful not in your aircraft. You can set up your own home base station using bigger antennas if you want to get data into your house or to your computer as well. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start off with a little bit about Adsb, and then I will go over the parts we need. We'll put everything together. I'll talk about how to flash your own SD card. You can also buy a lot of this stuff pre-assembled if you don't feel confident in using some of the software that I show you, but it's really straightforward. It's mostly insert file, click go, and things happen. So what is Adsb? Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast. You probably have heard in and out. This is an in device only. This is Adsb in only. This is only going to be receiving data. It will not be putting any data outwards. So I know we're in Alaska and a lot of people are concerned about having out and Big Brother monitoring, but if you want to avoid that and still have the benefits of traffic advisories or flight information such as restricted airspace that may have popped up, or if you're out in an area where you don't have cell service, but there's an Adsb antenna, you can still get weather information coming in graphic and text form. As I said, this provides weather and data information. The Adsb Out requirements you can find on the FAA's website. It's been, of course, it's mandatory now in certain areas. Any controlled airspace, specifically in Alaska, you're going to be looking mostly around the Anchorage airspace and flying over Anchorage International above the Class Charlie. That's the biggest place you're going to be needing Adsb or being required as far as the frequented airspace. But you can find all the requirements for that on the FAA's website. And you may be thinking, okay, I have Adsb out. I had you maybe got the rebate that they were allowing people to have to help thwart the cost of installing Adsb out on your aircraft. And you went ahead and got the cheaper and great option, the U-Avionics, which replaces your nav light, of course, one of your nav lights or on your aircraft. And that was Adsb out only. And you may be thinking, oh, I don't get weather from it. Of course, you don't. It's only out. There's a couple other ADS-B solutions that Garmin have and that Apereo have with their Stratus. A lot of them are ADS-B out only. Some of them are add-on devices to your current transponder. They wouldn't be giving you ADS-B in, as ADS-B in is not the requirement that the FAA and other aviation authorities around the world have gone through and started issuing. So this is going to be an easy way to put into your cockpit of your plane, or if you're a renter like myself, you switch planes a lot, this is great because you can take it with you between all the aircraft. That's one of the big reasons I built my own. The Stratus version, the one that's manufactured by the Stratus company, costs around $400. Some of the Garmin ones cost almost $600. This we can put together for as low as $115 if you play with the parts where you can find the pieces. But if you just buy them straight off of Amazon or off of eBay, it'll probably more like $120, $130, depending on the seller, of course. And I like portable devices since, like I said, I am a renter. I've flown in a few different flight schools, different people's planes. So I always carry also my own radio with a NavCom on it and a portable Garmin GPS. And then I've done some modifications to how they get mounted, such as using a GoPro suction cup and a double mount that I hook into the radio and mount it this way. And I'll go over more of the mounts on how to mount the Stratus towards the end once we have it together. The other nice thing about the Stratix that you're building is it can connect to a lot of devices. So if you're flying with another pilot friend or a couple of friends, you're in a bigger aircraft, you can set it up and it connects through Wi-Fi. So everyone can just connect to it and receive the traffic information as well as the weather information as you go along. And you heard me mention Stratus, and this is the Stratux project. It's an open source project. And if you haven't heard of open source, it's essentially people that put work into a project and then allows the free use of that source code or any information they've built with it. A big one in the past has been Mozilla Firefox, which a lot of people use, as well as VLC Player and most of the Linux operating systems if you're a little bit on the computer nerd side. This allows people to play with the source code and possibly make it better, since everyone has access to what they're modifying and they're able to adjust it as such and then let the public know what they've done. Some of that does lead into companies making a profit off of, because it was a free open source, they'll produce the product or modify it and then sell it after. But that's a little bit on the introduction of ADS-B, and we will get into putting this piece of equipment together. So here's a few pictures of all of I have my screen share here, if you can see it. We'll just work through let's work from the outside in. So the outside, we have a case, and I'm gonna switch the view here. Cool, Dominic zooming in here. So I'll show you the other case options toward the end, but we're gonna go with the one that I use in the.
If you can turn off your screen share, it'll give us a bigger picture of what you're looking at here.
Yeah. Here we go. All right, so here's the case. This is the case I use for the one that I first built about, would it be about 3 years ago now, when my flight instructor at the time, he was a ham radio guy, so he's a little nerdy. If you're watching this, Mark, I mean that in a kind way. So he was already used to building radios and playing around with radios, and he introduced me to this project. So we have the case, which we'll end up screwing together. We have the Raspberry Pi motherboard. This is an entire computer that you're holding, or that I'm holding. And if you're following along and make your own later, it has USB ports, which is what we use to plug in our ADS-B antennas, our GPS antennas, and any other equipment that you want to add on to it. It has a small micro USB charging port on the side. And then it also has some other ports that we are not going to use for this project, which is an HDMI port for broadcasting video from it because it is just a mini computer. It also has a standard audio auxiliary jack that you could use for audio. And I've seen online, if you want to go deep into it, you can use this because there's an access port on any case that you buy, and create a audio alert system that you could in theory plug in to your audio panel to get traffic alerts through your electronic flight bag as well. There's a couple GPS options. I'm going to go over the one that I use, and then I'll show you some of the other options at the end. The main one put out for the Stratux project it's a GPS item. And this is just a GPS receiver. And each of these items you can find on either Amazon or Stratux.me, which we can put a link into the chat here shortly. And then I didn't take these out because I'll show you how to install these later. It's once you click in some of these antennas, pulling them out can damage the circuit board it's on, so I just left these ones attached. These are the two Adsb antennas. They're pretty small. I have one that is one of my extra backup ones. This is all it looks like, just a circuit board with a plug, and that will end up plugging into one of the USB ports. And lastly, the other big thing here, once you have all of that plugged in, is you're going to have some antennas, and they just look like standard radio antennas because that's all they really are. There's a couple different companies that make them. There's a company called CrewDog. They do a lot of the support for this project, including making some of the electronics and selling them through Amazon and their website. They are a US military veteran ran company, and a lot of their money goes back to supporting veteran programs, which is cool. I've used them as well as this other company, Nulik. I prefer the CrewDog over the Nulik, mostly because of the size of the receivers. These are, like I said, these are the receivers the Stratix project sells that they plug into, and Nulik receivers are a little bit thicker. I don't know if you can see here. That little bit of thickness in such a small case can be an issue fitting the case back together, and that's mainly the reason I prefer the CrewDog sold electronics. And the last big thing you'll end up using is a micro SD card. You will need one of these to flash the software onto for the Raspberry Pi to operate. And one of the optional pieces you can buy for this is it's an AHRS chip, so you can have attitude reference for your Horizon system. It also has a micro fan control on here. And then this is super easy. You can look at the pinout. I'll post the diagram and the link to it on the website, but it just plugs into the pinout, and then you plug your fan controller into here, and then all of it provides data to the Raspberry Pi unit. All right. This is going to be really simple, guys. It's I can't think of a way to make this more complicated. It's pretty straightforward. You buy the pieces and you put them together, and I'm just going to show you how to put them together now. The biggest issue you might have is flashing the SD card, but you can buy preloaded SD cards as well. And we'll go ahead and get into it. So we have our case, and I've already put in our antennas here, but I have a case that I have not put the antennas into yet, so I'll show you how that goes together. So these will come in little radio antennas like this, and there will be a threaded end on one side, and then there'll be a connection on the opposite side for plugging into the USB receiver that I showed you. And this is pretty straightforward. There is holes on the one side of the case. You push that antenna through. You put the locking washer on. You put the second washer. You put the nut on. You tighten them together. It's a good idea to tighten these now. And you can use these small wrenches that come with the case. If you don't tighten them down thoroughly, what will happen is you will continue to try to tighten them when you go out to the aircraft when they become loose, and then you'll just spin the top because the case is shut. And then the antenna, which is connected on the inside firmly, will just keep spinning the antenna wire. And then that'll turn into a mess and possibly break the antenna wire on the inside. So it's a good idea now to get these nice and firm. You could use Loctite if you wanted to keep these from coming apart, but you'll do this for both antennas. And you'll put them in both sides. As I said, I already have this one done, so we're gonna go through this. Once you have them together, the antennas will clip in to their respective USB receiver, and they'll end up looking like this. It also comes with a small computer fan in here. Sometimes it might make some fan noise, and what I do or have done with that is I'll either use a little bit of super glue into the holes here where there would be screws generally. You can just drop a little bit in each of the sides and then just hold it. Be sure not to get any super glue on the fan blades, otherwise the fan won't run. Another way to do it, if it was shaking bad, I've tried some silicone, little bits of just basic waterproof silicone, and dabbed it around the corners, and that seemed to work pretty well also. All right. So you have your Raspberry Pi. It'll probably come with the heat sinks not installed, but they are just stick-on heat sinks that'll have a sticker back you take off, and then you put these heat sinks on there. And it will end up installing upside down like this. So we need to install I have my attitude reference indicator here, but if you did not, there's a pinout on the website for the Stratix project that'll tell you which one to plug into, and it is the number 2 and 3 on the outside row of the motherboard here. But I'm going to reassemble this so that I can use it tomorrow. So I will put my attitude reference on here, and there is a small pinout on here. You probably won't be able to see on the camera, but it is it's a positive and negative connection, so you want to make sure you have this plugged in correctly. So I'll plug my fan into this fan controller like that. And I will also plug in each of my ADS-B antennas here. And if you use these ones, they are cut so that you can put them side by side and they will fit. If you use the Nulik ones, they are just slightly wide and will end up hitting each other, and they'll end up fitting, but you have to really squeeze them together and put them in as almost one piece, but two of the antennas. Then we'll put our GPS antenna in here. It won't fit on the outside because of how the circuit board is laid out, so you have to put it on the inside USB. And I have an extender for my, my GPS receiver as well. So this all goes I have my antennas flipped around. This one is shorter, so it doesn't hit the tower. It's a pretty tight fit, and if you'll end up figuring out exactly how this lays in, but this ends up laying in like that. And I'm going to tuck in my GPS extension here, so that way I have an external, I can hook up an external GPS antenna to the outside so I can get a better reception depending where I place them in the aircraft. If you have any form of arthritis, this is not a necessarily pleasant feeling you'll have in your hands putting together small electronics.
And Ryan, while you're doing that, we have a question here. I'm going to say, is it necessary to use an anti-static wrist strap? Can you repeat that? I don't know if they can hear me on the mic.
Yeah, the question we have in the chat, is it necessary to use an anti-static wrist strap? I thought someone may end up asking this question. I've never used them. The electronics aren't that sensitive, but if your house is super dry or wherever you're putting this together is really dry air and you've been walking around on carpet with your cotton socks on, maybe discharge yourself somewhere or wear a wrist strap. But I've never used one. It's not super sensitive. I'm sure some electronics professional would enjoy arguing with me on that. All right. Let's see what's going on. Since these antenna wires are in here pretty tight, sometimes they'll flip and then make it not so easy to get this to sit in here. So some playing with the antennas may be required. All right, and the next feat that we are going to attempt to accomplish now is to place our back cover plate on here without this moving around. For the ease of this, we're gonna just move that out of the way for now. And this is keyed. You can see on the one side that's facing you, the external ports, you have access to them. So you'll place the cover on. And the hole should align with the motherboard and the opposite side here. You can see my old version, the way I mounted this with a GoPro mount. And then you'll just go ahead and put all of our screws back in. And this is a non-precision plastic case, you don't need to necessarily do a star pattern, but I have some mechanic background and out of habit like to do a star pattern so that there's no torquing of the lathe going on. So at this point, you would also put your antennas on. They screw onto the outside. I bought these mini ones to try them. They seem to be working well. I saw them for sale and they're Nulik brand ones. They're quite a bit shorter than the other antennas that you would get. So they have a little bit less reception, but they fit better into your flight bag, which is can be a big deal. They also don't, or they do bend. They bend a little bit. They seem to have a firmer grip on their pivot point than the large ones. I assume that's just from a mechanical advantage. But these can break as well. After 3 years, I'm pretty rough on my electronics. I did have one of my antennas break and I had to replace it. And you can see there's no wire on the opposite side to screw it in with. That ended up snapping off when I put it into my flight bag and not an optimal position. All right, so we have our antennas on, our cases together. We have our GPS and our Stratux receivers on the inside. The last thing we need to do is we need to put data onto a micro SD. And I'm going to go ahead and screen share what you need for that. So you will need to download a bit of software. It's called etching software or flashing software. The free one that I use is called Balena Etcher. I'll send that in the chat right now as well. Balena Etcher. And I will bring this up. And you can see this program is pretty easy. It'll say flash from file. So you'll insert the micro SD card into your computer. If you need to use an adapter, do that. Plug it in. And it'll come up so you can flash from file. The file is on the stratix.me website as well under software. And this is Stratix -V1.6R1. That's just the version of it. And you may need to do this to update as well eventually. So then you'll select target. There it goes. And I have a generic SD card in here. Select target, and then you hit flash. And then, yes, you'll have to allow it to make changes. And then this will go through and flash it on there. What is this saying? Yeah, it'll take about 5 minutes, but at that point, it'll say flash complete. The software is loaded on there. And then you can remove the SD card. And then you can insert it into the motherboard. On this case, there's a access port on the outside. I will see if we can zoom in on that. So there's this little spot here. That's where you put this SD card. You will insert the SD card all the way. And it's not spring loaded on the Raspberry Pi, so you may need to use the screwdriver just to make sure it's pushed in all the way. So then we have the case and it looks like this. Everything's together and it should work now. With the Stratix case, you will need an external power source, as I said. You could plug in if you have a USB port installed on your panel of the aircraft you're flying. Most people will just have a battery pack that they plug into and I've been using usually a 10,000 milliamp hour battery pack, and that'll run it for about 4 to 5 hours, which is pretty good. Then I keep a backup battery pack. When you're not using it, unplug it because it'll still keep running and collecting data and trying to send it out. It is just a mini computer. So I'll go ahead and plug this in. Let's see how this goes. And then you will end up connecting it to your electronic flight bag. So you'll go into it'll come up with a Wi-Fi. That's how you connect it. So once it's on and running, you'll go into your tablet or your phone or whatever you're using for your electronic flight bag. Open up the Wi-Fi settings and you'll see Stratux pop up. You'll connect to that one. Well, maybe plug into this one. And then once you are connected to it, like it's in a Wi-Fi network, you can go into your electronic flight bag. And depending which one you're using, if you're using ForeFlight, WingX, or Flight Plan Go, you'll go to the options menu and it will tell you GPS okay or GPS active, ADS-B up, or it'll just have a green circle that says ADS-B. This works with almost all electronic flight bags except for Garmin. Garmin Pilot does not work with it. There's a workaround for it. I have not gotten it to work. I know some people have. They'll load the Stratix as if it's a virtual device. It's really complicated and it only kind of works in Garmin and doesn't give all information. So it's much better for ForeFlight, or there's a couple other new ones that have come out in the last couple of years, but I use WingX and then I back it up with Flight Plan Go, which is a free electronic flight bag. Ironically from the Garmin company now, since they bought them. If you're a professional pilot from the last few decades, you know this is how you filed your flight plans online, was through Flight Plan, fltplan.com. But if you want to try for the first time a flight bag and you don't want to sign up for a subscription, this is a great one. You still get moving maps and data, weather information data on it. Yeah, it's a pretty good one to have. And I always have 2 of them installed in case like an update happens with either Flight Plan or with WingX and it's not operating, then I can use the other one if I have to. And that is how that works. The first time you set it up, it is recommended to do it when you plug in the power for the first time, have it outside. I've had this happen with some that I built and I hooked up the power on the inside after rebuilding them. It needs to find and create GPS information. So it needs to connect to some GPS satellites for it. So I'd recommend plugging it outside or near a window where it has line of sight to satellites going over. And then other than that, this is how it works. I showed you the one that I use here. This is the Stratix case that you can get on Amazon pretty easily. And this is the mount that I originally used for a long time. And it's a really nice mount. This just slides on. And then I had used a rubber band to attach my battery to the outside. So it slides on like this, and then you would stick it straight to the window with those. But these come off pretty easy. So unless it's your aircraft, and this is like a semi-permanent mounting solution, you're going to be losing these every time you get out of a rental plane, and then you've got to buy a pack of them online. And it's not that they're expensive, it's just, it's not super great. But if it's the same plane you're flying most of the time or all the time, I do like this one because it's a little more firm and they stay connected with the 4 suction cups. But I have switched over to this other mounting option, also found on Amazon for, I think this one is $15, maybe $12. And this one you'll put on the window. It's like a really nice GoPro mount where it has a vacuum. So you stick it on there and then you'll flip the switch and it sucks to the window really well. And then you slide the receiver in, and then you can hook up your battery to the outside. I really like this mount because I'm switching between aircraft a lot. So it's a much better option because it just seals to the window. And then if it loses suction, you know, it's probably after the day of flying. I haven't had too many issues with it. This other case that I've bought here is the one that doesn't require any screwdrivers to put together. And this one comes, it's a little more expensive than the Stratix one, like $4, $5. I saw it was on Amazon recently, but I bought this one on eBay. It has a RAM mount connection, and I know there's some GoPro options where you could also mount straight into this. It's got the same screw that is on the bottom of a tripod or some other kind of mounting hardware. And that clips in the back. The ball goes in, and you tighten it down. If you want to put this in your plane and leave it in there, this could be another semi-permanent option. And then the case comes apart. I do like this case for this specific reason. And that's because you can take off, it's in 3 parts here, but you can take off one part of the case and have direct access to all of the USB ports. So if you want to switch anything around or you need access to things, it's really easy to get to these. This one, I am using the USB external mount GPS receiver. You know, it's just an extra thing dangling around in your flight bag if you're moving around. I don't use this one often. It's usually one I'll loan to a friend if they want to try it out, just because I like having the internal GPS. But yeah, this is how you put together your Stratix project for, we'll just say, under $150. You know, you can keep it as low as you can, even down to 115, 120. You can print your own case. You can put these cases together in anything. You can have weather and traffic information in any plane that you rent. And that's it. If there's any questions now or comments, we can we'll take some time for that now. See, there's one in here. I see Steve responded to, he said the same thing I did with just avoid carpeted areas. Strap is a good idea, but you'll be okay without it. Any other questions? You can type them in the chat there. If that's everything, and we'll leave the chat window. Oh, there we go. Does the software support multiple Efbs at one time? Yes. So it's put out by, the question is does the software support multiple electronic flight bags at one time? Yeah, you can run, I have my phone, my tablet, and I've had other people connect to it in the same aircraft all at once using different electronic flight bags. It's just sending the data to your tablet or your phone, and then the electronic flight bag is changing that information into what you see. Is ADHR's option useful? No, not for this, because it has to self-reference a certain point. So when you put it in, unless you're going to keep this in the same spot in the same plane all the time, I don't see a purpose in it. Just for that reason, if it's going to be your plane and you're going to mount it and it's going to stay in the same section, and then you can let it reference its horizon, it's a nice backup. But most tablets also have this in it. If you're using an iPad, you'll be able to use that as well. So I think the chip is about another $20 for that thing. I only have it in the one because I wanted to try it and play around, but I don't think you need it. Any future features coming? Not that I'm aware of, but like I said, it's an open source project, so people are always working on them. And since it's based off of a system that the federal government is doing, yeah, you're going to get, like I said, the traffic data, the weather data, which now gives you also, I think it's as of last year, it gives you TFRs if there's a pop-up TFR, which is great to know. I know all of you check your NOTAMs every time you fly. The ADHR's option, Robert just asked, I just answered as well to Della. Like I said, I don't necessarily recommend it if you're not going to be doing where you just leave it in the plane system, you don't need it. See if there's any other questions. And if there's not any, like I said, we'll leave the chat window open for about another 5 or 10 minutes. We'll be here. We'll go ahead and turn off the video, but if you have any questions you think of and you want to type into the chat there, we'll go ahead. Thank you, Della. And thanks, Robert and Mark, for your questions. Steve as well, for asking these questions about the electronic flight bag and answering the question about the strap. That was great. And I'd like to thank Dominic as well. He's the one that set up all of our lighting and our camera equipment for today, and he set up my microphone for me, so thank you, Dominic. And Will is a new worker here at the Alaska Airmen's Association. He stayed over tonight to help monitor our chat room, so thank you, Will. He's working here now as well. And Jackie Mass, who was the first one to ask me if I would like to host this option. So thank you, Alaska Airmen's, and to everyone that joined us tonight. Have a great night, and if you have any questions in here, go ahead and ask them. Otherwise, you can also send them to the email that you received with the Zoom, and Will or Jackie will send those on to me if they cannot answer themselves. Have a great night.